Okay, I'm back. For number 17, you're going to need to draw. So maybe you'll need to pause real quick so you can go get some paper. For number 17, you're going to need to draw. I have on the screen here a lot of carbon cycle. You can see that a little circle got cut off that said number 17, and this says number 18. So this over here is the biotic carbon cycle. Biotic is living things. In any ecosystem, abiotic is non-living, like rocks. And biotic is living stuff like ants and bacteria and butterflies and red-tailed hawks or whatever. Okay. So I want to talk about how carbon moves through living things. This is what we call the little carbon cycle. It's the basic carbon cycle. And then later in another lecture, we're going to do these drawings over here. Okay. Where we'll talk about including clouds, and we'll include water, and we'll include rocks. And then eventually we'll add humans, and we'll do some fossil fuels too. Okay, so there's basically one lecture, another lecture, but today it's just going to be this one. And you'll have to forgive me. I'm used to teaching with a whiteboard. I'm old school because I had a really fascinating teacher, by the way, who inspired me a great deal. And he would make these beautiful drawings before class every day on a chalkboard with like these big chunks of chalk. And they were really colorful. And I would watch him work because I always had like a break. And so like after one class, I didn't really have time to go back to my dorm. So I would just sit there and watch this guy draw and get ready for his class. And then like right on time every day, he would start with these like beautiful drawings in the background. He taught physiology, so he would like freehand draw like all these complex bone structures in the heads of reptiles and stuff. This guy was a magician. Anyway, I'm old school. I was inspired by that guy. I've always taught using my whiteboard. And I can use other tricks. I've got an iPad, and like I got the little pointer thing on the mouse. But sometimes I just use the same whiteboard pictures because usually I would use this image to remind myself what I got to draw on the whiteboard. Whatever. You're going to need to pause, copy this. You don't really need this part right now. You don't really need that part. So just copy that really quick and then come right back. I'll assume you've already drawn this now, okay? This is the basic little carbon cycle. This is the part that you probably already know: photosynthesis and cellular respiration. The reagents of photosynthesis become products of photosynthesis, but those exact same things are the reagents of cellular respiration. So cellular respiration output is the input of photosynthesis. The output of photosynthesis is the input of cellular respiration. Okay? So that's CO2, carbon dioxide, that's H2O, water. This is O2, oxygen. And this is glucose, sugar, C6H12O6. You'll have to know those. You don't have to know why those numbers or what it means, but you do need to recognize those symbols. CO2 is easy, H2O is easy, O2 is easy. Glucose is kind of the only 612-6. It's a hydrocarbon, HCO, CHO. I think you can remember these. And photosynthesis is done by plants. Cellular respiration is done by you and me, because we can't do photosynthesis. But actually, cellular respiration, interestingly, is also done by plants. We'll come back to that. You'll also notice that in the red up here, I've drawn a mean, angry sun. I always draw the sun angry because I hate being out in the sun. I always feel like the sun is trying to kill me. So there's my angry sun, and you'll notice that there's an E for solar energy. So plants use things from the environment, excuse me, plus energy from the sun to rearrange ingredients into this stuff. Okay. Those carbons, we're doing the carbon cycle here, right? So what we're really talking about is this one. Carbon in the form of CO2 in the air gets clumped together into C6H12O6, which is glucose or sugar, using this energy. Plants do this neat trick where they can take this input of energy and they can store energy in those carbon bonds. That's why they do it. In case anybody's been curious, plants don't make sugar because they want to help you. Plants don't really know that you exist. And if they did, they probably wouldn't like you. Not trying to be a jerk. I don't think they would like me either. I step on plants all the time. Plants don't make sugar for us. It is not this like balanced, natural thing, big love fest. Plants make sugar for themselves. They're being selfish and greedy. They're not doing this because they want to be eaten. Plants are doing this because they need to store energy. You know, the sun don't always shine. Like, plants got stuff to do. After dark, when the sun is gone, plants party. They like run around and they like rave and they like blow on whistles and like roller skate. And so they can't get their nighttime energy from the sun because the sun ain't there because it's nighttime. They use carbon in the environment and sunlight to store energy in the form of carbon bonds, because at night they're going to do the same thing that we do all the time. At night, a plant will break those carbon bonds to release energy for the plant to do plant stuff. I don't know, cellular processes that plants do. I'm really not an expert on what they are. Whatever plants do, I don't know, they grow and they like make seeds and like they make fragrance for their flowers. I don't know what the flowers do. But whatever they do takes energy, and they get that energy out of those carbon bonds by going chop, 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 and using oxygen from the air. And plants like you and I will breathe out that CO2. So plants do both. Plants do photosynthesis in the day so that they have energy stored that they can release in the night through cellular respiration. Plants do both of these. You and I, we're kind of different organisms. We can't do the photosynthesis. We don't have chlorophyll. So we cannot use the sunlight to store energy. We got to steal it from someone else. We have to eat things that have stored energy in their chemical bonds. That's the only way that we can get our energy. That's why when you have a bunch of sugar, you get a sugar high, because you've just got all that energy out of all those carbon bonds. That's it. You might remember some vocab, right? Like autotroph makes its own energy storage compounds, and heterotroph like uses somebody else's energy storage. But I don't know. This is like the easy part of the carbon cycle. I don't really have a lot to add, I don't think. I would probably point out that there's a couple terms here, uptake and release. Like uptake is when the ingredients go up into the living thing, and release is when they leave the living thing. So when you go, that was uptake of oxygen, and when you go, that's release of CO2. Is not rocket surgery, but you probably should know those terms. I guess it's like the most obvious thing. It's all around us, and somehow everybody reaches high school never having heard this. I always feel like I'm telling you a big secret, which is like the dumbest secret, but plants make oxygen only part of the time. The rest of the time, they use up the oxygen, just like you and I do. So like when you exhale CO2, everybody always does this in like the third grade, right? Where they're like, plants make the oxygen, we make the carbon dioxide, and so we feed the plants and they feed us. And it's not exactly accurate. Plants do all that without us. And then we just kind of like shoehorn ourselves into that. Like we're just plain old predators. They don't need us. All right. That was basic. I'm sure I hope you've already heard all this. If you have questions, though, you should ask me. It's not a big deal. I'm ready for you. I can take all your questions. But I don't know. I think, yeah, I think you got all that. Let me see, just to make sure. Before I leave, I want to check my notes, make sure I'm not forgetting anything. What are the basic things? Photosynthesis. What are the reactions part of cellular respiration? Draw a single atom back to the atmosphere. Yeah. All right. So we should probably be done, I think, with 2.2 now. When we come back, presumably in another day, we're going to do 2.3, which is the more complicated carbon stuff. This stuff and this stuff, that's a little bit more complicated. And then we'll get into like nitrogen and stuff like that too. Okay. Enough babbling.